The frantic barking sliced through the quiet of the night, a primal cry that struck terror into Sarah's heart. Bob, their German shepherd, stood rigid at the nursery door, his deep growls reverberating through the house. Inside, their son Alex lay unnaturally still, his tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Sarah rushed in, her pulse pounding in her ears. Michael fumbled with the lights, but nothing could drown out the sense of dread that filled the room. Their trusted nanny, Dr. Rachel Wilson, was gone. Her usual spot beside the crib was empty. Instead, Sarah's hand trembled as it touched the bottle on the floor, a strange residue marking its rim. A residue that shouldn't have been there. In that moment, their perfect world shattered. A family, so carefully built, was about to face an unimaginable threat, and it was one that had been there all along, hiding in plain sight. Welcome to HeartForce channel, where you and I find more meaning in life through stories about dogs. Before we continue, please comment below and let us know where you are listening to this video from. And if you have any stories about your dog, feel free to share them with everyone. Michael Harrington stood in his office, staring out over the city skyline. The twinkling lights below seemed so peaceful, so far removed from the chaos that had been his life. At 42, Michael had been through it all. His career in law enforcement had ended in betrayal, a scandal that almost destroyed him. But he hadn't given up. Instead, he'd built Harbor Secretary Security, now one of the most respected private firms in the country. A man who had seen the darkness in people, yet never let it break him. His wife, Sarah, was no stranger to resilience either. At 38, she had revolutionized adaptive fashion, creating elegant designs for people with disabilities. It had been born from a personal tragedy, a car accident that left her cousin without an arm, a journey of finding dignity and self-worth through clothes that fit both the body and spirit. Their connection had been instant when they met at a charity gala 7 years ago, both committed to changing the world in their own ways. Their marriage had been a quiet, intimate affair, witnessed by close family, and one very special guest, Bob, the German shepherd who had been with them for years, a hero in his own right. Bob had saved 12 children from a collapsed building during an earthquake, working tirelessly to pull them from the rubble. The incident had left him with a slight limp, forcing early retirement, but his protective instinct had never dulled. Sarah and Michael had struggled for years to have a child. 5 long years of fertility treatments, each failure deeper than the last. It was a painful road, but through it all, Bob had been their silent comfort. When Sarah cried, Bob was there, his head resting on her lap. When Michael worked late, Bob patrolled the office, a reminder that he was never alone. Then, the miracle. After what seemed like endless heartbreak, Sarah became pregnant. Bob, as always, seemed to know before they did. His tail wagged in excitement the moment they heard the heartbeat. Throughout the pregnancy, Bob never left Sarah's side. His protective instincts, sharpened through years of service, were now focused entirely on her and the baby growing inside her. Their beautiful colonial home on the outskirts of Boston had everything they needed. A sanctuary of warmth with the best security systems Michael's company could provide. It was Bob's watchful presence that made it truly safe. He would always be there, sensing the slightest change, alert to any danger. The day Alex was born, perfect and healthy, Bob took his place beside the crib. He became more than a pet. He became Alex's guardian, his protector, his best friend. The baby cried, and Bob was there. The baby slept, and Bob watched over him. The connection was instant, their bond as strong as any human friendship. But they had no idea that their perfect family was about to face the ultimate test. Dr. Rachel Wilson, the nanny they had trusted, had come highly recommended. She was the calm, compassionate professional Sarah needed while she focused on her expanding fashion line. A former military nurse with 3 tours of duty and a distinguished career at Boston Children's Hospital, Rachel was exactly what they needed. And at 45, she had the warmth and quiet confidence that reassured them. She was everything they wanted in a caregiver for Alex. It had seemed like fate when Rachel was recommended by Sarah's brother, Dr. James Parker. She has a way with children that's almost magical, he'd said one evening over dinner. After everything she's seen, she wants to help build something beautiful. The transition had been seamless. Rachel had moved into their guest suite, and soon, she was a permanent fixture in their home. Her medical expertise offered peace of mind, especially to Sarah, who had struggled to balance her career and motherhood. Bob had seemed to accept her presence without question, but there was something Sarah couldn't shake. She noticed it one evening as she watched Rachel care for Alex, her movements smooth and efficient. Bob, usually so calm, had started acting strangely. He would watch Rachel closely, his body tense whenever she was near Alex. At first, Sarah dismissed it. Bob was just adjusting to the new dynamic, she thought. But it wasn't just jealousy. Bob had welcomed Alex from the very first moment. He had appointed himself as Alex's personal protector. This was different. Bob's behavior grew more erratic, and the changes didn't escape Sarah's notice. His watchful eyes followed Rachel's every move, and Alex, once so bright and curious, had become lethargic. His usual giggles and wide-eyed wonder had dimmed, replaced by quiet sleep and a distant stare. Perfectly normal. But Bob's instincts couldn't be ignored. He was trying to warn them. Something was terribly wrong. The tension in the Harrington household continued to mount. Bob's behavior grew more erratic with each passing day. The once gentle dog had become hyper-vigilant, pacing the hallways, his nails clicking against the hardwood floors in a constant rhythm. At night, he would sit outside Alex's nursery, his ears perked, watching the room with an intensity that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. Something was off, but the more Sarah tried to voice her concerns, the more she was reassured by Rachel's calm demeanor and Michael's logical approach. "It's just Bob adjusting to the new routines," Michael would say, dismissing her worries. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the change in Bob's behavior was a sign she wasn't fully understanding. One afternoon, Sarah came home early from a design meeting. The quiet hum of the house greeted her, but it wasn't the peaceful welcome she had come to expect. Instead, she found Bob standing rigid at the nursery door, his growls low and continuous. He refused to move, even as she called his name. "Bob, what is it?" she whispered, her voice shaking as she approached him. He didn't respond to her voice. His eyes were locked on something inside the nursery, and Sarah felt an icy chill creep over her. Inside, Rachel was changing Alex. Everything appeared normal, but Bob's distress only grew. His eyes never left Rachel, and his growls became more insistent, deeper. Sarah's heart raced as she stepped forward to see what was wrong, but before she could move, Bob lunged forward. He was close enough now to Rachel, and his teeth grazed her arm. Not enough to cause serious injury, but enough to make her freeze in place. "I'm so sorry," Rachel gasped, pulling her arm back. "I was just checking on Alex. I don't understand what happened." The apology didn't bring comfort. Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Something wasn't right. Bob, their ever-loyal protector, had never acted like this before. He had always been the picture of gentleness, especially around Alex. But this was different. "He's never bitten anyone before," Sarah murmured, trying to process what had just happened. Bob lay at her feet now, still and calm, but his eyes told a different story. His posture was tense. His guard was up. The situation grew more complicated when Michael arrived home. He had been in meetings all afternoon, but when Sarah explained what had happened, his face hardened. "Rachel's never given us a reason to doubt her," he said, glancing at Bob. Still lying at Sarah's feet, his eyes unwavering. "We've trusted her with Alex for months. Are we really going to let a growl from the dog change that?" But Sarah wasn't convinced. Bob had always been the family's first line of defense, the silent sentinel who had watched over them when they didn't even know they needed guarding. If Bob was growling, there had to be a reason. And deep down, Sarah knew that the only reason Bob would act out like this was if he sensed something dangerous. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Bob had been trying to warn them for weeks. His protective instincts had kicked in long before they understood. It wasn't just the way he acted around Rachel. It was Alex, too. For days, the baby had been unusually quiet, lethargic. The joyful coos, the gurgles of a happy infant, had vanished. Alex had become distant, as if he were lost in a haze. Sarah had tried to dismiss it, chalking it up to the stress of new parenthood, the sleepless nights. But when she looked into her son's dull eyes, something gnawed at her. This wasn't just exhaustion. This was something more. The next day, as Sarah continued to observe, she found herself logging Bob's actions. She couldn't help it. Every time Rachel came near the nursery, Bob would react the same way. His tail would stiffen, his eyes would narrow, and his body would tense up. She began to notice the patterns, the times when Rachel was near, the times when Alex seemed to sleep too long, the moments when Bob's warning growls grew louder. It wasn't long before James, Sarah's brother, stopped by for a surprise visit. As a pediatrician, he was usually calm and collected, but today, something was off. His eyes immediately flicked to Alex, who was lying in his crib, staring blankly at the ceiling. "He's unusually quiet, isn't he?" James said, his voice neutral but filled with concern. Sarah tried to brush it off. "It's just a phase. Rachel says it's normal." James raised an eyebrow, his gaze never leaving his nephew. "Have you had his iron levels checked recently?" His question lingered in the air, unspoken tension building between them. Sarah didn't know why, but the question made her uneasy. She smiled tightly and changed the subject. But the seed of doubt had been planted. That night, as Sarah watched the baby monitor from her phone, she heard it again, Bob's growling, low and persistent. This time, she decided to check. When she entered the nursery, Rachel was there, as usual, tending to Alex. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had missed something important. "Why does Bob keep growling at you?" Sarah finally asked, her voice quivering slightly. Rachel froze for a moment, then smiled. "Oh, dogs can be like that. He's just adjusting to his new role as a guardian. It's perfectly normal." But Sarah wasn't convinced, and neither was Bob. The days grew darker, the tension thicker. Bob's behavior wasn't improving, and neither was Alex's. He slept for hours, his tiny body heavy with exhaustion, while Rachel continued to insist that it was just a phase. But the more Sarah watched, the more she realized the truth. Bob wasn't just reacting to Rachel's presence. He was trying to protect Alex from something they hadn't even seen yet. And the more she thought about it, the clearer it became. Rachel's smooth words couldn't mask the darkness beneath. The breaking point came when Sarah decided to trust her instincts and investigate further. She had no idea what she would find, but Bob's warning was enough to drive her to action. She had to uncover the truth. The following day, Sarah could no longer shake the feeling that something sinister was unfolding right under their noses. It wasn't just Bob's behavior anymore. It was the unexplainable distance between her and Alex. The lethargy in his once vibrant eyes, and the cold feeling creeping in her gut every time she saw Rachel's reassuring smile. That evening, as Michael worked late in his office, Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she had to find something, anything, that could explain the unsettling changes in their home. She slipped into the nursery, carefully inspecting the area Rachel had been so attentive to. As her eyes swept over the room, they landed on the baby journal that Rachel had kept so meticulously. The entries were precise, documenting Alex's feeding times, nap schedules, and developmental milestones. But it was the notes at the end of each entry that sent a cold shiver down Sarah's spine. Alex didn't seem to respond well to his usual games today. He was a little quieter than usual, but that's typical for this stage, the latest entry read. Sarah frowned. Rachel had always been so precise with everything. And yet, there was no mention of Alex's unusual behavior. Nothing about his lack of energy, his glazed eyes, or the fact that he barely reacted when Sarah would sing to him. Her heart raced as she flipped through the pages. The further she went, the more she realized how little was written about his emotional and physical well-being. Rachel's words had always been reassuring, but now they felt hollow. The more Sarah read, the more she felt a growing sense of dread. She closed the journal and tucked it back in its spot, her mind whirling. Could Rachel be the cause of all this? Her instincts told her there was more to Rachel than met the eye. As Sarah left the nursery, she was startled by the sharp bark of Bob, who was pacing near the hallway. The sound pierced the silence of the house, making Sarah freeze in her tracks. She turned to see Bob, his eyes fixed on the stairs leading to the guest suite above the garage, Rachel's quarters. Without thinking, Sarah began walking toward the stairs. Bob's growl followed her every step, louder and more insistent. The dog seemed determined to stop her from going any further. Sarah paused at the bottom of the stairs, her hand on the railing. The house was eerily quiet now, save for the thumping of her heart. She knew Bob was trying to warn her. But what was it he sensed about Rachel? Why was he so agitated, so determined to protect Alex at all costs? With a deep breath, Sarah climbed the stairs, Bob's growls trailing behind her. She reached the guest suite and paused at the door, her hand hovering over the knob. She had no idea what she was about to uncover, but she knew it couldn't wait any longer. Inside, Rachel's belongings were neatly arranged, as expected. The scent of lavender filled the air, an aroma Sarah had always associated with calmness and tranquility. But as Sarah's eyes scanned the room, they stopped at something that made her blood run cold. The small vial. It was tucked discreetly beneath the stack of books on Rachel's nightstand. It was a clear liquid, and the label, though worn, was still legible. Sarah read the word printed on the label, and her stomach dropped. Benzodiazepines, a class of sedative medication dangerous for babies, especially in the doses found in Alex's bloodstream. Sarah's mind reeled. The pieces clicked together like a puzzle, each horrifying revelation falling into place. Rachel hadn't just been caring for Alex. She had been drugging him, slowly and methodically, masking the truth behind her professional demeanor. Her pulse raced as she backed away from the vial. Her thoughts a blur. This was no coincidence. The lethargy, the lack of response, Alex's unnatural stillness, it had all been caused by Rachel. And it wasn't just happening to Alex. The sudden shift in Bob's behavior, his desperate need to protect. He had known something was wrong, long before she had. Her mind raced as she tried to process what to do next. Should she call Michael? Should she confront Rachel right now? She knew she couldn't wait any longer. Suddenly, Bob barked again, this time louder than ever. He charged toward the stairs, his body tense and ready to act. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized the urgency in his behavior. Whatever Bob had sensed, it was time to act. Rachel was getting too comfortable in her lies, and the danger was too real to ignore any longer. She rushed to her phone, her hands trembling as she dialed Michael's number. The line rang once, twice. "Michael, we need to talk." "Now," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "It's Rachel. She's been drugging Alex. I just found the proof. You need to come home right now." Michael's voice was urgent as he responded, "I'm on my way." As Sarah hung up the phone, she felt her world spinning out of control. The person they had trusted to care for their son, the person they had welcomed into their home, had betrayed them in the worst way possible. She had poisoned their baby, and worse. She had done it slowly, with calculated precision. Her heart ached for Alex, for the trust she had placed in Rachel, for the realization that she had missed the signs all along. How could she have been so blind? As she descended the stairs, Bob followed close behind, his eyes alert, his posture protective. Sarah hugged him close, feeling the warmth of his fur, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. He had been the one constant, the one who had seen through Rachel's mask of professionalism. And now, with the truth in hand, it was time to expose her for what she really was. The moment Michael stepped through the door, Sarah could see the tension in his eyes. He didn't need any further explanation. The look on her face, the frantic phone call, he knew. He could see the storm in her eyes, the same determination he had seen countless times in his own line of work. But this was different. This was personal. "We're going to end this now," Michael said, his voice low and filled with quiet authority. He glanced at Bob, who stood protectively at Sarah's side, his ears alert, his eyes unwavering. Sarah nodded. She couldn't keep the fear out of her voice, but there was something else now, something burning in her chest. It was the drive to protect her son, to protect their family. No more doubts, no more waiting. They had to act. I've already called James. He's on his way, Michael continued, pacing the room as he processed the situation. We need evidence, proof, not just for Rachel, but for whatever else is lurking in the shadows. We need to bring this down. The house, once their sanctuary, now felt like a ticking time bomb. The walls closing in with every passing second. Sarah could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. But even amidst the chaos, there was one thing she knew for sure. They weren't alone. Bob was there, his presence a silent reminder of the loyalty and courage they had always taken for granted. Within minutes, James arrived, his face drawn with concern as he walked quickly through the door. "What have we got?" he asked, scanning the room before his gaze fell on the vial of benzodiazepine Sarah had found. "Rachel's been drugging Alex," Sarah said, her voice steady now, her resolve firm. "It's all here. We have proof." James nodded, his face a mix of disbelief and anger. "I never should have let this go on. I thought she was a professional, but I missed something. I should have known." "No one could have predicted this," Michael replied, his voice calming. "What matters now is we stop her before she does any more damage. We need to expose this, make sure it's over." The plan was simple, but dangerous. They would gather the rest of the evidence, hidden cameras to catch Rachel in the act, and confront her with the truth. It wasn't going to be easy, but they had no other choice. The tension in the air was palpable as Michael coordinated the installation of hidden cameras, his security team working silently and efficiently. They focused on the nursery, the kitchen where Rachel prepared Alex's bottles, and the areas where Rachel had spent most of her time. It felt surreal, setting up surveillance on someone who had once been trusted. But Michael knew better than anyone that loyalty could be a weapon, just as betrayal could cut deeper than any physical wound. As the cameras were positioned, Sarah couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. They had trusted Rachel, had opened their home to her, and now they were about to destroy the illusion, the facade that had kept them all in the dark. What had happened to their family, to their sense of safety? The next 48 hours were excruciating. The security feeds played out on Michael's laptop, a silent stream of footage that left Sarah's heart racing. She sat beside him, tears streaming down her face as she watched Rachel go through her routine. Everything seemed normal at first, but then, at 2 a.m. on the third night, they saw it. Rachel entered the kitchen, her movements precise, practiced. She took one of the bottles they had already prepared for Alex, and instead of simply warming it, she added something from a small vial she had hidden in her robe pocket. Her motions were quick, professional. This wasn't her first time doing this. Michael's fists clenched as he saw the footage. "Gotcha," he muttered under his breath, his voice filled with cold rage. Sarah watched the screen, her stomach churning. She had known all along that something wasn't right. But now, with undeniable proof in front of them, the truth hit harder than she ever expected. It wasn't just the drugs. Rachel had been using them to control Alex, to make him easier to manipulate, to cover up the lie. And that wasn't all. The cameras caught something else. Rachel was going through Michael's office. She was taking photos, accessing files on his computer. It wasn't just about Alex. It was bigger, far bigger. Sarah's blood ran cold as she processed this new development. They weren't just dealing with a rogue nanny. They were dealing with an infiltrator, someone with an agenda, someone who had a purpose far beyond caring for their son. Just then, James received a call. His face fell as he listened. "Rachel's more than we thought," he said quietly. "She's not who she says she is. We've been duped." A pit formed in Sarah's stomach as she heard the truth. The woman who had been trusted with their child wasn't just a medical professional. She was an agent in a much larger game, one far darker than they could have imagined. And the stakes had just gotten much higher. "Michael," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "What do we do now?" "We act," Michael replied firmly, his eyes steely with resolve. "We confront her. We bring it all to light. And we make sure she can't hurt anyone else." They moved quickly, making plans to confront Rachel with everything they knew. They wouldn't let her get away with what she had done. No longer would she hide behind the guise of professionalism. The truth would come out. But as the hours passed, Sarah felt the weight of the situation bearing down on her. The life she had built, the family she had fought so hard for, everything was about to change. But she couldn't stop now. She couldn't let Rachel's betrayal win. Alex was counting on her. Bob was counting on her. And together, they would fight to protect everything they loved. The moment had come. It was no longer just about protecting their family from a betrayer in their midst. It was about exposing the full extent of the conspiracy they had uncovered, a conspiracy so vast and dark that it threatened to unravel the world they had worked so hard to build. Michael paced back and forth, his mind racing through countless scenarios, calculating every move. He had lived his life in the shadows, as a detective, as a businessman, always thinking ahead, always staying 2 steps ahead of the danger. But this was different. This was personal. Sarah stood by the window, staring out at the darkened street beyond. The sky was overcast. The rain started to fall in heavy sheets. It matched the weight in her chest, the heaviness of everything they had learned, everything they had fought to uncover. And yet, there was a spark of resolve in her eyes, one that had not been there before. They had been tested to their limits, pushed into a battle they hadn't chosen. But now, it was a fight they could not walk away from. Not when Alex's future was at stake. Not when Bob, their loyal protector, had already given them everything. Rachel won't know what hit her. Michael said quietly, his voice firm. We've got the evidence, and we've got the truth. It's time to confront her. No more running. No more lies. They had decided to do it alone. No backup. No police. Just the Harrington family and their unshakable resolve. Rachel had already shown her true colors, and there was no going back. Bob sat by Sarah's feet, his eyes locked onto hers, as if sensing the gravity of what was about to unfold. His fur had grown grayer around the edges, but his loyalty was unwavering. He was no longer just a family dog. He was their last line of defense. And when they faced the unknown, they knew they could rely on him. The camera footage had confirmed their worst fears. Rachel wasn't just a nanny. She was part of something far darker, something they were only beginning to understand. The evidence they had gathered revealed Rachel's involvement in a shadow operation, one that used children as leverage to manipulate powerful families. It was bigger than they had ever imagined. They couldn't trust anyone anymore. Let's go, Sarah said, her voice a mixture of determination and sorrow. She couldn't hide the pain in her heart, but she knew what had to be done. They were going to take back their son, as if holding its breath, waiting for the storm to break. Sarah's hand trembled as she touched the doorknob to the guest suite, her heart racing. Inside, Rachel was in her usual place, sitting calmly in a chair, reading a book. Her calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the tension that hung in the air. When she looked up, her face broke into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Is something wrong? Rachel asked, her voice too smooth, too practiced. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. You're about to find out, she said, her gaze hardening as she revealed the vial of benzodiazepine she had found. You've been drugging our son, Rachel, and we know everything. Rachel's eyes flickered for a brief moment, just enough to betray her calm facade. But it was all the proof Sarah needed. What do you mean? Rachel's voice trembled, though she quickly masked it with a forced laugh. I don't know what you're talking about. Michael stepped forward, his tone cold. Don't play games with us. We've seen the footage, Rachel. We know you've been poisoning Alex. And it's not just him. We've found everything. Your real identity, your connection to a much larger operation. Rachel's face went pale, her eyes narrowing. You have no idea what you're dealing with, she spat, her calm slipping away. You think you've uncovered everything, but you have no idea how deep this goes. You exposed nothing. Bob growled from the corner, a low rumble that sent a chill down Rachel's spine. She flinched, taking a step back, but Bob's eyes never left her. He was the silent witness, the one who had known all along. He had been the first to sense the danger. And now, his growl was a warning to Rachel, a warning that she was out of time. "You've been lying to us from the start," Sarah said, her voice trembling with controlled fury. "You drugged our son, you manipulated us, and you were part of something much darker than we ever could have imagined. But it ends now." Rachel's hands trembled as she reached for her phone, but Michael was faster. He grabbed it from her before she could make the call. "You can't stop this," Rachel hissed, her calm demeanor now shattered. "This isn't over. You have no idea what's coming." Michael shook his head, a look of determination on his face. "It's over for you, Rachel. Your web of lies ends here." And then, without warning, Bob lunged. Not at Rachel, but at the phone in her hand. With lightning speed, he knocked it from her grasp, sending it crashing to the floor. He wasn't going to let her escape. Not this time. As the phone slid across the floor, Michael seized the moment. "You're finished," he said, his voice full of cold certainty. Rachel's eyes filled with rage and fear, but Sarah wasn't afraid anymore. The pieces had fallen into place. They had the evidence. They had the truth. And now, they had the power to end this. Rachel had tried to manipulate them, to break their family. But she had underestimated them all. "Take her," Michael said to the security team that had been monitoring the house, waiting for this moment, "and make sure she never hurts anyone again." Rachel was escorted out of the house, her face twisted in fury. She had underestimated the Harringtons, and now she was going to pay the price. As the front door closed behind them, the weight of the moment settled in. Sarah sank to her knees, her emotions crashing down on her. It was over. Their family was safe. But at what cost? She looked down at Bob, who had returned to her side, his eyes still watchful, still protective. He had never stopped guarding them, even when they had doubted him, even when they had sent him away. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Bob gave a soft whine, resting his head on her lap. His work wasn't done yet. He was their protector, their defender. And as long as he was with them, they would be safe. As Michael stood beside her, he wrapped his arm around Sarah's shoulders, pulling her close. "We're going to rebuild, Sarah," he said quietly. "We're going to heal. Together." And in that moment, Sarah knew that they would. It hadn't been easy, but the fight had been worth it. They had exposed the darkness, and they had triumphed. Their family was whole again, and nothing would ever tear them apart. This story is a reminder of the power of loyalty, trust, and the strength of family. Sometimes, we're forced to confront the unimaginable, but in those moments, we find our true resilience. The bond between a dog and its family is unbreakable, and it's through that loyalty that we learn the greatest lessons of all: to protect, to love, and to never give up on each other. What do you think of the story? How do you think Bob's loyalty impacted the family's journey? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the HeartForce channel for more powerful stories about dogs and the unbreakable bonds they share with us.